Hi, I'm Andrew Bradshaw, partner and co-founder of RTC. Welcome to Property Care Matters, the video podcast series brought to you by RTC, your go-to source for practical tips and valuable insights on everything related to property care. RTC, the Northwest's leading property care specialist.
Hello, thank you for joining us and welcome to the first ever RTC video podcast. Today we'll be discussing how to prevent condensation and mould in our homes, which is the first instalment within our series Property Care Matters. This podcast is mainly to provide information and handy tips for you, the homeowner or occupant, to help solve your everyday property care problems. My name is Sam, I'm a qualified surveyor who works for RTC, and I'm joined by co-founder of the company, Andrew.
Good. Hi Sam, how are you? You okay?
Not so bad, thank you. Yourself?
Good, yeah, very good, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, looking forward to this.
Yeah, so am I. So before we get stuck in, can you give us a brief insight as to who RTC actually are?
Yeah, just a brief insight. RTC are a multi-award winning company. We specialise in building preservation, specialist property care, basement and structural waterproofing. We cover the entire Northwest. We're members of our industry's only trade body, the Property Care Association, and we're also a Which Trusted Trader. We've been in business since 1990, so over 33 years now.
So longer than I've been alive.
Yeah, that makes me feel slightly old, but yes.
Yeah, right. So this episode is primarily focused on how to prevent condensation and mould. But before we get into that, for the people who may not know, what is condensation? How is it caused?
Well, condensation's the biggest form of dampness in UK properties. Firstly, and basically we do have what we call a condensation season. It's normally between October and April. That can vary, to be honest with you, depending on external temperatures, but it's recognised between sort of October and April, and it's normally caused with an imbalance between heating and ventilation, and it occurs when basically warm air comes into contact with a cold surface. But condensation primarily is describes a change of state. It describes a change from when water is in a vapour or a gas, and it actually changes to a liquid. And when that occurs, it's what we call the dew point.
So most commonly people would find, as an example, maybe water on a window, cold surface, excessive moisture.
Yes, yeah, that's the first time they'll actually, realise they've got a problem,
So, sorry to cut you short.
Yeah, no, just to explain, obviously, because with the way condensation works, is warm air can actually hold more moisture than cold air. And just to try and sort of explain the process. The reason we don't really get a problem with condensation in the summer months, for argument's sake, is because the air is naturally warm. And because warm air can hold more moisture, any moisture that's being produced within a property can be completely dealt with by the air because it's nice and warm. So naturally, we've got your windows and your doors open anyway, but obviously it can cope with it comfortably. The problem is in the winter, that's when we get the problems, and really the temperature of the air is purely reliant upon, say, for example, the central heating being on. Yeah. So whilst the heating's on, the air's nice and warm, so any moisture that's being produced or in the air can be held by the air. The problems arise when either A, the heating goes off, or B, that warm, moist air comes into contact with a cold surface. And then it can't then deal with the amount of moisture, and obviously condensation occurs.
Okay, so thanks for that. I've noticed that we've got jug of water, 2 varying size glasses. I'm assuming you've got some up your sleeve.
Well, yeah. This is a little experiment I prepared earlier, to be honest with you. Just to help explain about warm air and cold air. So what we've got here is we've got a big glass and we've got a little glass. Okay. Now let's imagine, for argument's sake, is the big glass is warm air and the small glass is cold air. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill this up to about there, and as you can see, there's the warm air at the minute. So the warm air, big glass, little glass, cold air. So sort of how full's that, do you reckon?
60, 70.
70, so let's say 70%. So at the minute, you know, there's 70% humidity in the air, and the warm air can naturally and comfortably deal with that moisture. The problem is if that air cools, for the reasons I've just mentioned, as you actually start pouring that into the smaller glass, as you can see, that is now full.
No room.
And there's no room. It can't now actually deal with the amount of moisture. And if I kept pouring the water in, condensation would occur. And that's the sort of little sort of a visual that sort of explains warm air. So if you imagine warm air is the big glass, cold air is a small glass. Obviously the bigger glass can hold more water than the little one can.
It's a great visual sort of aid to show.
And we're going to have to drink this now, because otherwise it's going to spill everywhere, isn't it?
So you mentioned water, excessive moisture in a property. Where does that moisture come from?
Well, firstly, the moisture, it comes a variety of sources. I mean, you know, bathing, showering, cooking, those are the key areas where a lot of moisture is being produced. Not only that, but obviously if we dry clothes internally, that can produce a lot of moisture to the atmosphere. If we have dogs, plants, fish tanks, all this can add sort of additional moisture. And just by breathing alone, you know, we produce a massive amounts of moisture just by breathing.
Now, it's funny you say that, actually, because I read the other day, it's estimated that we breathe in and out approximately 22,000 times a day.
Wow.
I'm not recommending, obviously, you breathe less, but it just shows.
No, we don't want people to do that.
That's poor advice, but yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot, yeah, and I think on average, an average household produces something like 17.5 litres of moisture a day, which is like 30 pints of water. You imagine that's a lot. That's a lot of moisture. And that's just an average household, you know. And obviously, some people produce a lot more.
Right. So, if we had a house was suffering with condensation, what sort of signs should we be looking out for?
The first visual signs, you mean? Oh, right, yeah. I mean, firstly, you tend to find sort of water on the windows. The first one is in the morning. You know, you might wake up, you've got water on the windows. You might get water on the walls. You know, you feel your dampness on the walls. The bedding, you know, things like your bedding might feel a little bit damp. Which that's why. That could, you know, be a reason why you know, obviously an excessive amount of humidity. A lot of things like that can cause it. The smell of a musty smell. You get musty smell in cupboards and things like that. And obviously one of the main sort of indicators that you've got a condensation problem is the development of mould. You know, you might see mould starting in the corners of the rooms, the corner of the ceiling, behind units, behind stored items. So that's a good indicator that you initially give you signs that you've probably got a condensation problem.
Right, okay. So condensation does appear to be on the rise. But in your opinion, why do you believe it's becoming more of an issue in the UK?
Well, it is definitely becoming a bigger issue, and there's various reasons. Something that we didn't really suffer in the olden days. I mean, nowadays, what we want to do is we want to sort of, you know, our houses want to be as energy as efficient as possible. And that's what everyone's actually driving us to do. Now, you know, the problem is, you know, you're talking sort of draft proofing, double glazing, triple glazing even, you know, cavity wall insulation, loft insulation, external insulation. All these things are actually designed to keep all the heat in. But unfortunately, what it will also do is keep all the moisture in as well. And naturally, over the years, you know, it's gonna, you know, there's going to be bigger problems. A lot more people are occupying the properties more at the moment. You know, I mean, there's more people who live in the houses, so obviously there's more moisture being produced. You know, we have a lot more showers and baths than we used to. You know, you know, and I don't know anyone with teenage kids out there, but you know, we spend a lot more. They spend a lot more time in the shower, which obviously massive. You know, it can, you know, if you spend sort of 10 minutes in the shower and then spend an extra 10 minutes, you'll be surprised on how much more moisture you produce. You know, all this is having a bearing. Even COVID. Since COVID, if you can imagine, you know, and you'll know from, you know, from the calls we're getting and the surveys we're doing, since COVID, condensation there's been a spike in condensation inquiries, because obviously everyone was working from home, and even now, you know, some people are still working from home. Yeah, so you know, whereas before we weren't producing moisture, now we're cooking for lunch. You know, we're producing a lot more moisture than we did do.
It's interesting, actually, because I also read another thing that said a study was carried out last year. People in the UK spending an average of 10 hours and 54 minutes more time in their houses or indoors each week compared to 5 years ago. So it equates to about 23 days a year. That's more.
Yeah. And obviously, they're not going to be not breathing, not cooking, not making brews. Having a cup of tea or something. So it all adds to it.
So one of the things that you mentioned was mould. Mm-hmm. Let's just get straight to it. What can you tell us about mould?
Well, mould growth is a direct result of humidity and condensation. It doesn't actually come with any other form of dampness. You sometimes might find it if you've got a severe leak and there's a lot of excess, water. But primarily, it only comes with humidity and condensation. Mould spores are what we call omnipresent. They're around us all the time.
Like pollen.
Like pollen, yeah. They just need the right conditions to germinate. And that's normally, sort of 70% humidity and above for a sustained level of time. Normally at that point, it's the right conditions for mould spores to germinate. Mould comes in various colours. You've probably seen, if you tend to find it, obviously depending on what material it's affecting, is dependent on sort of what the colour of mould is. You tend to find a black mould on windows, on walls, in ceilings. Yeah. That's the most common colour. That's the one you'll see initially. And then what you'll find is, behind units, behind wardrobes, things like that, you'll tend to find it's a green mould, white mould, sorry. And then obviously on things like leather and suede, you tend to find it's a green mould. So it comes in different colours, but it's all basically mould growth, and it's all a direct of moisture and humidity.
Okay, and in terms of health implications, I know it's quite a hot topic at the minute, but
yeah, well, it does have some health implications. People can be very, very sensitive to mould. Certainly, young babies, children, the elderly. And obviously, if you touch mould, some people can get an allergic reaction from it. And until the unfortunate tragic death of Awar Bishak in Rochdale, mould has actually never been attributed to anyone's death. It has now, and obviously we have to be very mindful of that, and obviously with trying to control it.
Absolutely, yeah, there's been a seismic shift in the industry, I'd say, since.
Definitely, absolutely, yeah.
So, mentioned at the very start about condensation being caused as an imbalance of heating and ventilation. If we focus on heating, what impact do you believe the energy crisis is having on condensation?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, and that adds on to what we've just been talking about. It's a new challenge. It really is a new challenge, because what we're finding is with properties not being adequately heated, then when I talked earlier about warm air, cold air, warm air holds more moisture than cold air. Well, if there's no warm air at all, as soon as that moisture is being produced, it's going to be condensing. So condensation problems are going to get far worse. And we noticed just last year, again, the increase, and going to properties to do surveys. How many times did we go around? There was no heating on. So it is definitely creating a bigger challenge, because what we're finding is not only condensation and mould issues are going to get worse and are getting worse, they're happening a lot sooner in the season as well. So it is having a big impact. Definitely.
It's difficult because people can't afford as well to heat their homes, so it's a balance, because obviously we've got the rising costs of energy, and people are just really struggling to get that heat into their homes financially.
It is a catch-22 situation, and we can't make people put the heating on, and if they can't afford to do it, then they can't afford to do it. And it's there are certain things that maybe can be done to help them in those instances to reduce it.
So let's get down to the bulk of this podcast. Mm-hmm. What can we do to prevent condensation of mould?
There are some quite simple tips that can help massively. We just talked about the energy crisis and heating, and if you are able to put the heating on, put it on longer but lower. It's actually more cost effective than having your boiler on a timer. You use that much energy getting that boiler up to temperature, That's like your sprint. It's like sprinting as fast as you can. Ultimately, you're gonna be worn out. But once it's got up to temperature, it's like jogging, if you like. So to keep your heating on longer but lower is actually not only basically saving fuel, you're saving money. So it's actually going to be cheaper than it would be if you got it up to a high temperature and dropped it down. We know that's not always possible, but if you can, keep it on longer and lower, and it will actually save you money. Other little tips are, with ventilation, for argument's sake. If you've got trickle vents in your windows, open them. You're not going to allow cold air to get in, but you're allowing a little bit of an escape for water and moisture to actually get out. Open your windows ever so slightly on latch. Again, just that little bit. If you haven't got the trickle vents, you open your windows just ever so slightly. A lot of windows now have the little security settings that you can actually
So you don't just open them wider. The wider is more moisture to get out.
No, opening too wide can cause problems. Firstly, if you've got your heating on, you're just going to your heat's just going to go right outside the window, and you're going to just waste money. But no, you can actually over ventilate, because if you open your windows wide, you're going to let too much cold air into the property, and it's going to obviously make the room colder, and therefore, believe it or not, more susceptible for condensation.
So bathing, what can we do in terms of that?
Yeah, little tips, and there's some great tips with bathing. Shower for less. I mentioned it before.
Yep.
Don't spend as much time in the shower. If your kids are in the shower, put a hot tap or a cold tap on somewhere, and it'll soon get them out.
Turn the Wi-Fi off.
Turn the Wi-Fi off. They'll soon come out. Yeah. But if you're having a bath, for argument's sake, if you put the cold water in before you put the hot water in, you can reduce moisture production by up to 90%. It's a massive thing you can actually do. Another thing in the bathroom is keep the bathroom door closed.
That's a big one.
It's a big one. The only time you should ever open that bathroom door is when you're walking through it. Because if you've just had a bath and a shower, you want to restrict moisture distribution to other areas of the property. So keep that door shut. Open your window slightly and let that moisture just escape naturally. If you've obviously got an extractor fan in there, it might not be the best fan, but if it's there, make sure you use it to allow to utilise it to get the moisture out. Little tips like in the kitchen, if you're cooking, a great one is what I tend to do at home is I fill my pans up, throw a little bit of veg in there, only use enough water that you're going to need to cook your vegetables or cook anything like that. Because obviously reducing moisture production, get the pan lids on the pans.
It doesn't seem like much, does it really? Put a lid on or keep the bathroom door shut. But if put together, builds a bigger picture.
Absolutely, it's all these little things that can massively help, and all these little things can help just reduce that little bit of moisture production, which in the end might solve the problems.
So things they can do. Let's say things that we should really avoid doing.
Things that we should really avoid doing. We should avoid drying clothes on radiators throughout the house. And a lot of people are. And the problem is it causes massive amounts of moisture production. Unfortunately, we know everyone's not got outside garden space. They haven't got a washing line. So we know some people, have that problem, have that dilemma. And if they haven't got a tumble dryer, what can they do? Well, what I'd recommend is buying a little maiden and actually drying your clothes on that maiden in a specific place. For example, like the bathroom. Put it in the bathroom, keep the door shut, because remember, that door's staying shut. We've got that window open slightly. If there's a fan there, it's hopefully going to do a bit of work. And if you do get a bit of moisture production in there, if you've tiled walls, it's going to form on the tiles, and it's not so bad. Avoid gas heaters, things like that. They produce a massive amount of moisture, and we find that we're going to some properties that have got a gas heater on. I think, every litre of gas we burn, we produce more than a litre of moisture to the air.
That's a double-edged sword, isn't it?
It's a double-edged
heating.
Yeah. But it's what we call wet sort of heating. Whereas central heating, things like that, are what we call dry heating, and that's a lot better.
Right. Okay. Brilliant. So, if we've got a property, or a homeowner, shall I say, that's implementing all these useful tips, avoiding drying clothing indoors, all that sort of thing, but they're still having an issue with condensation and mould, what should they do?
Well, that's always going to be the case, to be honest with you, because not the things we mentioned before will help. It'll help reduce the risks of condensation and mould, and they may actually fix the problem. But if the problem still persists, then they really need to employ the services of a qualified damp surveyor. So someone who can actually come out to the property, who can look at it, who can determine exactly, what's causing the issues and what the recommendations are as far as, fixing the problem once and for all. You will probably find that if you get a qualified damp survey, you will probably pay for that survey. But it would be the difference of knowing exactly what you need to do and not to do. And a perfect example is, the amount of surveys that we've been to do, and the client has actually said, I believe you're going to need to put a damp course in, and we haven't. We need it's a condensation issue. Absolutely. And sometimes the problems we get in these free surveys and these companies out there who are not qualified, who carry out these free surveys, they're going to spend 15-20 minutes and just tell them to open the windows a bit more, which we know can sometimes be a problem, or alternatively put a damp course in when it's not actually needed. And in fact, on the back of talking about sort of qualifications and on the back of what's just happened with AWAB in Rochdale, the government have released some guidance, and it's primarily based for social landlords and private landlords. But it talks about, it's called AWAB's law, and it's basically what needs to be done and what has to be done to improve the conditions. And the government have now even recognised the importance of our industry qualifications, for argument's sake, CSTDB qualifications, because they recommend employing the services of a qualified CSTDB surveyor when you want to diagnose problems with damp and mould. So it's good that it's actually, it's a massive step in the right direction, and that's how important it is to get the right advice.
So just to go back a bit with the sort of tips that people can do, mentioned about ventilation, fans. If you have a fan in your bathroom, what if you don't have any fans?
Well, if you haven't got any fans, then you might need to consider the installation of new fans. And even if you do have a fan, an existing fan, it might not be an ideal fan. It might be a fan which is connected to a light switch, which might have a delay on it, but only comes on when you turn the light switch on. And it might only be delayed for 5-10 minutes. Even if it's delayed for 20 minutes, it's still not going to be sufficient.
And no good if you shower during the day as well.
You're not going to turn the light on, so the fan's not going to work, no. So obviously it doesn't mean that if you've got a fan, it's going to be the right fan. If you are going to install fan or ventilation systems, really, with regards fans, you want to install a constant run humidistat control extractor fan. They're absolutely fantastic. They run constantly. They whisper quiet, so you can't actually hear them. And actually, they comply with building regulations. So we're looking at taking a minimum of 13 litres a second of moisture out of the air in a kitchen, and about a minimum of 8 litres a second in a bathroom. And then they also have a humidistat setting on them. So if the humidity builds up, if your son's been in there for too long, then the fan will boost and help get rid of some excess moisture. Alternatively, we can have things like whole house positive ventilation systems, and all these systems, believe it or not, are actually cheaper than you think to actually install. But when we're talking about ventilation, fitting the right kind of ventilation is paramount.
Right. I mean, they're quite cheap to run as well, I believe, because they have to be to comply with building regulations.
Yeah, I mean, I think an average fan is a penny, 2p a day, if that to run. So they are very, very sort of cost effective. So if you've got a tenanted property, for argument's sake, and the tenants are living in the property, and if you're a landlord, you know that it's not going to have a massive impact on financially for the tenants as well, which is obviously a good thing.
So we've got an issue with mould. We have a look at an extractor fan. Yep. So say mould in the bedroom. Let's get an extractor fan in the bedroom. Yeah. No, that's a good point. Often get this, when we talk about fans being, put in bedrooms, clients often say to us, well, hang on a minute, I've got mould in the bedroom, so why are you putting a fan in the bathroom? And it's a really good point, and it's logical, really, but actually what we need to do is we need to get rid of the moisture at source, because the majority of moisture that's being built up, which is actually causing the problems in the first place, are being built up primarily
in the kitchen and the bathroom. That's what we call the high vapor pressure areas. So as that moisture is being produced, it doesn't just circulate around the property sort of willy-nilly. It actually, it actually is drawn to these cold areas. So if you've got a bedroom, an external wall of a bedroom or behind some stored items or something, might even be on a north facing wall, it's naturally these areas are going to be colder, and this moisture in these high vapor pressure areas are going to be drawn to these areas like a magnet. So by putting a fan in the bathroom actually gets rid of the moisture at source, so there's no moisture left to actually be drawn to that cold area and cause condensation and mould
Which
growth.
also is, it's logical. When
It is,
when you explain it
absolutely,
like that.
yeah.
It's a bit
yeah.
like when you cook something in the kitchen, for example, smoky bacon or a curry or something like that. You won't just smell it in the kitchen, you'll smell it throughout the house.
Yeah,
Sugar moisture's
exactly the same. That's a really, really good analogy, that. Yeah, I'll remember that one.
Yeah, you can have that one. So if we've got an issue with mould, what we're best doing with that?
Well, really, if we've got problems with mould, firstly, if we've got the presence to actually get rid of it, you can actually get, you want to be using a warm soapy water or a good proprietary mould remover. You don't want to be using one of these sort of the cheap ones you can get in the supermarkets or bleach. Whilst it'll clean it off, it will come back sort of, twice as quick, because mould can form twice as quick on a sterilised surface. And also a lot of these products like bleach and a lot of these sort of, mould removers that you get in the supermarkets contain a product called sodium hypochlorite, which has got hygroscopic qualities because there's sodium in there. So it actually will encourage moisture to attract to that area. So what we'd recommend, warm soapy water, or a really, really good proprietary mould remover that you can get. There's some specialist ones you can get on the internet.
Fantastic. But as you've said, obviously the source needs to be addressed rather than just removing it.
Absolutely, because if you don't fix the problem, if you don't get to the source of the problem, your mould and your condensation will just come back.
Okay, well, thank you very much for today.
Is that it?
I think that's it,
Wow.
yeah. That's all we've got time for
wasn't
today.
Too bad, was it?
We do have another one coming up soon.
Yeah, really excited about this. We've got a ventilation expert coming in who's going to talk all about ventilation. We touched on it earlier, which is great. So that I'm really looking forward to that, and that gives advice on what is good and what isn't. And so yeah, very excited about that.
So if people want to keep up to date with this podcast, future podcasts, how do we go about
that? You can subscribe, and hopefully this is going to be one of many. We've got a list of ones we'd love to do and share with you to offer you some fantastic tips. So you can go on our website, go onto our social media and click on YouTube, go onto our YouTube page and click subscribe. Alternatively, you can go straight to YouTube, type in RTC Preservation and click on the subscribe button there. And why not connect with us and follow us on all our social media channels?
Absolutely. It's worth mentioning about the website as well. Loads of free information on there.
Yeah, fantastic.
At your disposal, really.
Yeah, the website is a great source of information. We have loads of information, not only about condensation and mould, but all the services we offer. If people are suffering from penetrating damp, rising damp, woodworm, dry rot, there's loads of information there, and it's absolutely a great source of information for people to have a look at.
Andrew, thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, Sam. I've really enjoyed it, and look forward to doing it again very soon.
Absolutely, and thank you for joining us. We'll see you soon.
Thank you. Cheers.